Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you, Rembrandt, for an introduction like that. The start is very good. And also I would like to thank the organizers for having me out here. The problem is that we talk about energy supply, and the problem is that we are also the problem. Before I forget, I'm affiliated with TU Delft 50% of my time, and I'm also affiliated the other half of my life to an energy strategy consultancy, Alberan. Oops, I did something totally...
Yeah, you press the button. There we go.
Are we back there? And so we had this lunch, and this is what we do. We consume about 2,000 kilojoules per day. Most of us are prosperous. We may eat a little bit more. But we also need comfort, transport, and goods. And that is 100 times more energy consumption than just the food we eat. And that's precisely the cause of why we are here talking about the solution to the problem we are causing ourselves by being so incredibly greedy. And we can't stop it. My carbon footprint is probably a little bit higher than that due to extensive traveling, and it will apply to most of you. So it's more than appropriate that we also sit here and think very critically about how we can solve the problem. Because per person per year, this amount of gas, crude oil, and coal, which is the daily amount we are consuming on average in this planet, 1.4 cubic meter of gas, 2 liters of crude, and 2.8 kilograms of coal. That's what we carry around every day. So if you prorate that per person per year, you have these amounts: 1 ton of coal, a fairly big tank of oil, and a fairly big swimming pool, if it would be possible with gas. All persons per year, we end up with these enormous amounts of energy, which at the end of the day we need to produce, find it, and produce it economically. And so that's when we get into graphs like this, where the fossil fuel sector is still the basic backbone of our energy supply system. At the very bottom you see coal, it's growing. Next you see crude oil, and it is growing. Next you see gas, and it's growing. And also you see there is still a amount of nuclear power being supplied. It's provisioned to grow. And the demand curve, which is the top one, basically the differential between what we can supply by fossil fuels and nuclear has to be filled up with renewables. And in a sense, all our energy supply opportunities need to develop in tandem fairly fast and quick. I'm going to talk about natural gas, which is, of course, this portion here. And crude oil has been covered to some extent. That is what we can expect from shale resources. Because the problem is that most of the growth needs to come from unconventionals. And when we say unconventionals, it's the stuff which is fairly difficult to extract and also economically more challenging. There is a high degree of uncertainty involved for the reason that these resources are not interconnected in the traditional way as we know from our conventional oil and gas fields. Here is the example of the United States, which we have seen historically being very good at when the conventional oil resources and the conventional gas resources were declining, filling up the gap with exploiting and producing unconventional oil and unconventional gas. This is where we are today, and the expectation is that this is going to grow. The unconventional gas growth in this IEA projection has already been tempered a bit as compared to the energy information projection. quite a bit, because the last I had seen from the US is that this would double by 2035. And so we have this appetizing example from the United States that at least we might have a new resource to develop to fill some of the gap, the gaping gap in front of us, if we want to continue to consume per capita so much energy. And it's only growing because we have more fellow citizens on this planet who wants to become as prosperous as we are. And they're not to blame for that either. So here are these societies who are going to demand more energy, and they're dependent on oil imports and gas imports. China, India, Korea, they're all, like the European Union, moving into the direction of more import dependency for oil and gas. The United States has shown that they can do the opposite. Their import dependency for oil and gas has been declining, entirely due to these unconventional resources. And so the rest of the world wants to copy that success. And there are at least two questions related to that. Is it societally or socially acceptable to develop these resources? And we all know that that discussion is center stage here in the UK, in Europe, and in many other places. And the other question, which maybe is less widespread being discussed and outlined, is it commercially interesting? Yeah? I will be focusing not so much on the societal stakeholder discussion, but more on the economic aspect. At the end of the day, the economic aspect will also be very important, I think, to tackle. And if you want to tackle that, the next step is improving your technology so that it becomes cheaper and that it becomes more effective to extract that unconventional energy. So whilst the rest of the world is concerned about air quality, fracking noise, earth tremors, groundwater pollution, and land surface cars, which is important to discuss, and which is important to solve, partly by technology, technology will need to provide new data and solution to much of the problems. Drilling on land is the most convenient situation we have. We've been doing it for a long time, and I always oppose it to drilling in Arctic deep water. That's a major challenge for petroleum engineers. Our engineers from Delft are in those places. But the least challenging place to be, at least technically, is drilling a well on land. Here is a well in The Hague. It's here, there is a noise wall around it. And this is the well at Fort Worth Dallas Airport. There was a major shale gas development there, and I think it's exemplary of how things can go. So let's take a quick look at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, which happens to be located exactly on the sweet spot of the Barnett. And so it's huge acreage, which was extremely attractive for Chesapeake way back in 2006. There were extensive negotiations with the airport authority, and the project got underway. The seismic crews needed to do their seismic pounding at night so that they would not be disturbed by airplane tremors, and the other way around. Airplanes should not be disturbed by their seismic activities. It doubled the cost for their seismic acquisition, $4 million. That was only a tiny amount. To make a long story short, the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport had a net revenue of $300 million as per to date. The signing bonus was $185 million, and the subsequent royalties, which is a quarter of the gross sales of the gas, brought in another $105 million or something like that. As per today, Chesapeake has a loss on this project of about $300 million. I'm not even discounting for the time value of money. Yeah? So that's gross, that's reality. And this is, in a nutshell, the problem we have with unconventional resource development. I'm going to show you a couple of more examples. And in the lower left corner, you see the red lines are the planned trajectories for the wells. Only 1/3 of these have been completed by Chesapeake. So we are advising the airport how to proceed now with further development of the resource. The resource is real. This is a close-up of the Barnett Shale. There is nanopores. The stuff is, this is the size of a hair in cross-section. And so the pores in these rocks are really tiny. And there is several problems, of course. It's not interconnected. You need to frack it. And also, it's not always mature. It needs to be buried at the right depth to either transform it into oil or gas or wet gas, so that you have oil, gas, and liquids. And it's, for a scientist, tremendous opportunity to study the system, and for engineers, a tremendous opportunity to optimize the recovery techniques. So we will be talking a little bit about that, but not until I first outline a little bit more the challenge we have with defining these unconventional resources as reserves, because they are so incredibly volatile. It's simply extremely difficult to deal with that. This is a simplified map by Petra Hawk engineers of the Shale. It's one of the 6 major plays, shale gas plays in the US. And the contours show you the quality of the wells in the area. So the richest sweet spot is this stuff here, where the estimated ultimate recovery per well is 10 BCF. 10 billion cubic feet is what you get out of those wells on average. If you go further outward to the outer edges of the onion, if you so will, the quality of the wells is decreasing. The reason for that is that the thermal maturity and the amount of organic material in the geological depositional environment simply is poorer than it is in the so-called sweet spot core area. And another problem is you only discover that after you have drilled quite a couple of wells. Because if you knew up front that the sweet spot is here, you would not have acquired and paid the signing bonus, which was up to $25,000 per acre, for that entire acreage right up front, which was the practice and still is the practice in the US. We've done some financial analysis, and this may look complex to you if you're not familiar to net present value calculations and internal rates of return. I'm sure some of you are. All you need to know is that the current gas price in the United States on average for the past year was $2.10, and this year we probably have an average price of 3.5, I think. So calculating with $4 per MCF per 1,000 cubic feet is not very conservative. And we go through each of these zones. So the sweet spot area clearly is profitable. If you have an internal rate of return on your investment of 20%, that's good. But if it's lower than 15%, no sane oil and gas company would develop such a resource if you would know it up front. And so all the other zones have become completely uneconomic, and that's why you are below the zero line. So much of the service area shown there. And so that's a pretty dramatic predicament to be in. You're producing this stuff, but you're basically selling it as a subsidized product. US gas consumers have, for more than 50%, their utility bill being footed by the investors in the shale gas operating companies. Here is a sensitivity analysis. We stylized the previous map you've seen. And depending upon the gas price, you're in each of these zones, you're either economic or sub-economic. You're economic if you're up there in that corner, and you're sub-economic when you're up here. And it's entirely determined by the estimated, basically the quality of the organic material and the maturity in the acreates. In the center, it's very high, and so then you're up here. If you go outwards, you have lower maturity and lower estimated ultimate recovery. And if you combine that with the gas price, the wellhead price, if you have a higher price and you have a high estimated ultimate recovery, you're ending up economic. And so when the gas price is dropping very fast, as it has been doing over the past 5-6 years, due to overproduction basically in a closed US market, your internal rate of return is just going down, down, down. And so you will be perpetually in a situation of marginal production at best or sub-economic. And so that's pretty dramatic. And we see the effect of that also in the, in the rig count at the 6 major US shale gas plays. Here is the Haineville's, the Barnett, the Marcellus, the Eagle Ford, Woodford, and Fayetteville. And you see that, okay, we started off with vertical wells mostly, then directional, and then we all discovered to make it a little bit more economic, we stick entirely to horizontal wells, and that's what's shown here in red. But the number of wells rigs being employed has plummeted in the Haynesville. In the Barnett, it's down very much as well. The Marcellus is keeping up quite a bit. Eagle Ford is also doing reasonably well. Woodford and Fayetteville are basically, I wouldn't say abandoned, but there is not much drilling going on there. The well counts are slightly better than this because the rigs are drilling faster and better. So there is some noise in this graph, but undeniably, appetite in shale gas drilling has dried up, and these companies are moving to places like the Bakken and to the oil window in the Eagle Ford. And then they encounter, of course, the other problem that the pipeline capacity is such that due to overproduction in those regions, that they become marginal again. On the oil production in the Bakken, very little profit is made today due to these pipeline capacity problems, as the previous speaker has been outlining. Let's go to Europe, because our big hope is now that we can reproduce the success. And understand me well, I'm not a critic of the US system. I work partly also by assignment via Albaran at the Bureau of Economic Geology in Texas. So they are my paymasters. But we can certainly learn a lot from the US, from its success and from its failure. So the success is, yes, we know now how to drill. The success is also, we know now how we should optimize. I think the failure is that the energy system model was not utilized fully. And so, because of its closed market, overproduction led to a decline in the wellhead price. You can't win from a declining wellhead price in a closed market. In Europe, we are in an excellent position now, even better, I understand, after the talk this morning by the Russian representative saying, like, look, a fixed amount of gas is coming from Russia, so you will have to fill the gap yourself. LNG may help, but we have not secured those long-term contracts yet. So can shale gas help us? This is a thermal maturity map. You see here the outline of the Netherlands, and there is Germany here and Scandinavia, and this is one of the targets. This is the Posidonia shale, and here is a thermal maturity window. This is the area where conditions are such that you can expect dry gas there. The other colors are indicative of thermal maturity for wet gas and for oil. That's entirely controlled by the amount of kerogen and the burial history of those rocks. And geologists know this. It's, again, Geology 101. But if you never went to a geology class, it's simply burial and conversion of organic material into hydrocarbons. If it hasn't been brought down that deep, you simply will have no gas. Yeah? So here we have gas. Nice thing about gas is that's also opening the pore volume and helps you to have a little bit more better conditions for fracking. I'm going to skip a couple of slides because I realize I'm running way over time. We can, of course, use American production profiles to estimate what well productivity will be in comparable places in Europe. So we ranked them, and we looked at the shales in Austria, the Elim shale in Sweden, the Silurian shales in Poland, the Posidonia in Germany, and in Turkey there is also a very interesting shale target. The lettering is indicating what kind of decline curve fits best, and we took them from respectively the Barnett, the Haynesville, and the Fayetteville. The Haynesville being as deep as the Silurian, Austrian shale. It's also then the most productive one. You take a 10-year life cycle of drilling, 10 wells per year, and you do all the calculations to estimate, can it ever be profitable in Europe? So I go forward a little bit. Here is all the input parameters in the cash flow model. The gas price we assumed is one which is supported by the long-term contracts of basically Gazprom oil index, so it will just go up with oil. We have a basic starting point as at $10 and there is inflation correction. And when you are having a cumulative discount cash flow which is way above the zero line, then you are in a good shape. So this is the output of our runs. We even have P1, P2, P3. That is, there is a little bit of spread in those curves. And without going through all the details, this is the ranking we have based upon the very best estimate of all parameters. So when you are an A asset, that means you're most likely to be profitable. Actually, that applies to Poland. And when you are an E, then you're least profitable in the ranking or the comparison of the 5 places we have here. Yeah? So you can speculate a lot about the input parameters. To be honest, I think all of the parameters still are a little bit biased and on the positive side. And if you would have time to look more closely at it, you see that all of them are not the major money earners that conventional projects are. Yeah? Conventional oil and gas projects always have been among the most profitable endeavors we know in our society. That era has ended. Yeah? We're moving into very expensive oil and gas projects, and shale oil and gas resources certainly are the slim margin endeavors. And so we need research. We do in Delft a lot of research. The funding is coming on only slowly, I must say. We lift on a backbone of existing expertise. Using our unique algorithms, I think, for processing seismics, we are now combining that with delineating brittle zones. Some of these are borrowed from Baker Hughes and Fugro, but we do have an academic program starting in this. So to delineate better in advance brittle and ductile zones so that we can be more successful with fracking. We also can delineate where the zones where the organic material content is higher than elsewhere, and so basically not waste our money on zones which are less profitable to begin with. We need also to know better what the stress situation is, because the stress is essential. You need to almost as a surgeon go in and manipulate the stress field such that your frac is placed exactly in the right way to maximize the contact with the reservoir. We do that also by doing seismic geomechanics, predict from seismics what the stress field will be you encounter, and then place the wellbore such that the surface area of your frac is aligned with the pre-existing stress field. And you need to know where you align your wellbore with to begin with before you frac, because if your wellbore is in the wrong orientation with respect to those so-called principal stresses, you already are no longer able to put in an effective hydraulic fracture system. So this is, I guess, highly technical stuff. This is the stuff of specialistic conferences. But we're doing fairly interesting work in this area. We also discovered that when you frac with a pressure in a certain field, that your frac is actually curling around your wellbore rather than going into the host rock. And so when you are in that kind of situation, you're also wasting the well and wasting your money. That's what you want to avoid. Lots of technical stuff. Number of frac stages also, when you optimize by going to up to 40 frac stages, you are basically sub-optimizing, because the more frac stages you have, the production of gas from those frac stages at some point in time is not increasing anymore. And so we're modeling, like, where is the optimum number of fracs in a particular subsurface system. Highly technical stuff, and it's needed to squeeze out basically based upon the investment in the fracking equipment and the fracking operation, squeezing out a certain margin still if we want that gas. The same story for oil. This is our laboratory building in Delft. We can analyze whatever aspect of subsurface sample. We have big equipment to test hydrofracks under the pressures and temperatures which are prevalent at 3-4 kilometers depth. So a lot of activity going on in that building, although you don't see it through this stained glass. And we have a unique arrangement where the PhDs are sitting in laboratory in offices around the laboratory facilities. In conclusion, today's shale resource business drivers really are something different than going for a profit. It really is about security of energy supply. If a government wants secure energy supply, then you go for this stuff. It's about job creation, and it's also about relocating, bringing back the petrochemical industry, as is happening in the United States today. The economic margins are slim. In the US at the moment, they're entirely negative. And I think it will be taking a while before we will be able to make a profit on shale oil and shale gas resources. Technology innovation can improve that, delineate the sweeter spots better and do the fracking job better. That's where the real challenge is. And so that's what is ahead of us. I also point out that if you want to talk to me about energy strategy system modeling in connection with the journal, please do not hesitate to talk to me, because we're always interested to have a dialogue with you in order to see if your research is helping us solve that major problem which I started out with and which this whole conference is dedicated to, namely how together we can be as intelligent as possible and still keep our bellies filled and transport and all that and supply energy to this planet. Yeah? Thank you very much.